I'd like to call to order the agenda of the Budget Committee meeting for Thursday, November 15th, 2018. Roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Abshire?
Here.
Mr. Anderpont?
Here.
President Barris?
Here.
Mr. Collins?
Here.
Mr. Landry? Vice Chairman Latour?
Here.
And Chairman Farnham?
Here, thank
We
you.
do have a quorum. Yes, sir.
Item number 3, consideration of making recommendation with reference to
Move on
approving
3.
requests
Second.
from the following entities for grant funding from the gaming fund.
All bullets.
Item A, Ward 4, District 13, Human Services Department, $7,500 for the Sulphur Housing Christmas Giving Program. Item B, Ward 6 Fire Protection District Number 1, $65,000 for the purchase of fire equipment. And C, Ward 6 Waterworks District Number 7 of Wards 4 and 6, $50,000 for the relocation of existing water lines on Edgerly Road and Holbrook Park Road. We have a motion by President Barris, second by Mr. Latour on all bullets. Do we have any discussion on any of these items? Hearing none, that motion will carry. Item number 4 is administrative presentation of the parish's proposed fiscal year 2019 budget. Mr. Bean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It is always a proud moment to present this budget to you each year. This is, of course, the document that, in essence, says what your focus is for next year and even beyond, not in terms of just the monetary amounts, but your priorities and so forth. I will go through a presentation like we normally do, certainly answer any questions you may have, and at the end we'll lay out a timeline between now and the final date for as far as action by the police jury. I do want to preface it, though, with a few thank yous, if you'll indulge me. This is a big process that actually starts way back probably late July even, as far as the finance folks. Judy Hewlett in finance is a key player in this. She is Tammy's right hand on the budget, and I want to thank her. From administration, Dane Boland, Alberto Galan, and Jessica Booth, and then all the department heads. I think for those, I think they're all here tonight. They just put in a tremendous amount of work to just obviously putting the budget together, but they do it with care. They do it to address services, but also balance with the fiscal resources that we know we've got to live within, so that you can pass something that you're proud of. And I want to thank all of them. But there's one person who oversees it all, and that's Tammy Buffkin, our Director of Finance. Tammy is simply a treasure. We know that. She doesn't like me or anybody talking about her like this, but I just can't say enough about her leadership, her talent, and her simply her commitment to the parish and wanting this to be a very well done document. And for 24 plus years, the GFOA award is awarded every year, and that's because of her leadership. And I want to give Jerry Milner credit prior to her. He did that as well, but somebody's got to pull all this together. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started, and we'll go from there. A quick outline as to how we'd like to try to go through this. This is similar each year. I like to give a context of the local economy that has so much to do with how we can actually utilize resources, because that's where they come from. And as the economy goes, it has a lot to do with how we're able to do that. I'll go through, secondly, what you might call the meat of the presentation. What is in the budget? The revenues, expenditures, capital, operating, so forth. And at the end, very briefly, just a look ahead, kind of that drop back, bigger picture. Where are we today? What are we looking at? And this year, I'm very happy to talk about the strategic plan that has been worked on this year and will be coming to you very soon for your approval for next year and beyond. So let's talk about the local economy. I don't expect you to read all of this. Obviously, it's in small print. What I want you to notice are the two items that are circled. This report is periodically well, it's on their website all the time. The Southwest Louisiana Alliance, Economic Alliance, posts this, and you can see there are, as we speak, announced plus part of that being active, $109 billion of economic projects when you add them all up. Of that amount, a whopping $44 billion is underway now. Now this goes back to 2013, 2014. But if you just put that number in context, it's so large, it's kind of hard to get your brain around it. But that is what's driving it. Most of it, not all of it, is of course from the LNGs, but also other petrochemical projects such as Sasol, Lotte, and others. That is a good place to be, and we feel like that is great for so many reasons, jobs and so forth. So how does that compare around the state? This is from the actual Workforce Commission, the state agency website, their latest report in September. You can see the Lake Charles MSA, that's Metropolitan Statistical Area. In our case, Calcasieu and Cameron, you see the blue shade. 3.8%. Calcasieu in our case is the unemployment rate. That's the one you want to be low, and it is low. It's the lowest in the state. And compared to the nation, it's low. We're very fortunate here. Other parts of the state, not so lucky. But even the ones that are doing well, we are tracking very well against that comparison. Now, flip it, and then this graph shows number of jobs. So that's the one that you want to be higher, and it is. Timing is very good every year, and some of you go to that. Lauren Scott comes down, and he goes around the state with his Louisiana Economic Outlook report. And for the past 5 years, just to be kind of blunt about it, we've blown everybody away in this particular report. 2015 was an important year. It's the first year in our history of the Lake Charles, Calcasieu area to cross the 100,000 jobs threshold. So that was just 3 years ago. And just since then, look at this year, 2018, we're already up to 120,000. That's actual jobs. The next 2 years, which is what he forecasts every year, is the highest forecast of any other MSA in the state. It's a 7.6% total job growth prediction. That's about 9,300 jobs, far surpassing any other part of the state. So the news has been good. It is continuing to be good. And again, it's going to be repetitive, but a lot of that has to do with a lot of these announced projects that are continuing or have a very good shot at starting. We don't want to say until they actually make final investment decision, but there's a lot of optimism in that area. So very brief overview. Certainly there's a lot more we could talk about. I do want to say it happened so recently I didn't put it in this slide. 2 days ago, I think it's called Wall Street 24/7 is the name of the firm. And they had a list of 31, I don't know why they picked 31 top cities or MSAs in the country for job growth between 2013 and 2018. Lake Charles, #1. It's not just in the state, in the country for that 5-year span. That's a pretty big deal. Okay, to the budget. Few key items as we get into this. Budget's balanced. Some years I think, okay, I'll just take that out. They know it's balanced. I want to make sure y'all understand we have the funds. Some of those come from fund balances, but that's what they're saved for. This is a good budget to have and balanced, and it's got a lot of significant capital projects, roads, bridges, buildings, facilities, drainage. I don't want to leave that one out. That's a biggie. At the same time, it's a moderate increase in operational spending. It's going to be higher, but the demands are higher. But we think it's very reasonable based on our needs. And a little bit, as far as what I'm going to cover, I want to compare the overall total budget of this year to next year, what's proposed. Then we'll do the revenues, then the expenditures, and just hit a few high points. And of course, I think all of you have a document in front of you. That's the actual budget, so take it with you. Don't leave it here, or somebody might take it. That's a valuable item. So, okay, this is the overall budget. Now, look on the left. The stacked bar on the left is this year's budget, $233.5 million. Broken down by the colors. This is the operational part in blue, and then red is capital. I think green there is the grants, and then other. Okay. The proposed budget for 2019 is $244.0 million. That is an increase of 4.5%, about $10.5 million. And you can see the category comparisons. Frankly, there's not a whole lot of difference in any one category. It's kind of split up. But one thing it's hard to see, but there's a new there's a new color in there in 2019, and that's debt service, and that's got to do with our bond payments that we expect to pay on some capital projects, which I'll get into. That's the big picture number, though. Total budget proposal, $244 million. This is the same information, but in table form with the numbers. So I'm going to leave that up, cover a few things while you browse it. On the far left column, 2018, we broke it down by the same categories, but you get to see the numbers better here. And then 2019 is next to it, then the difference between the two, and as you can see, that 4.5% at the bottom, that's the same thing from the previous graph. So what does this tell you? Well, operations, if you go to the top row, there's that, we'll get into that a little later. It goes up 3.6%, which is not a substantial increase, especially with inflation being higher lately. Capital goes up 3.2%. Let me say something about capital. That has a lot more to do with timing. The percentage going up or down, I don't want to say it doesn't mean anything. It means less, though, than other things, because it all depends when you build it. It's going up, but it's a whole lot of investment, but it's in the big picture, it's not going up that much. Grants, that's going down a bit. That's a function of the monies that come through from federal or state agencies. And again, here's your debt service added. Whether it's out of a whole budget of $244 million, it's only $1 million increase, so it's kind of a catch-all. And then if you want to kind of say, okay, what's making up the most? That's $10.5 million is the difference in this year's budget and the proposed. Well, two categories, capital and debt service, which is payments on debt for capital projects, so it's all capital related. That makes up 63% of the difference, almost 2/3 right there, which is a good thing. That means that's investments in the future that you are making for the next 10, 20, even 30 years. So before I get into break it down, any questions on the overall? And we're going to get into the details a little, but that's the big picture. Now we're going to break it down. Where are the sources of these funds that we need to provide these services? There's our pie chart, and a couple of points here. You'll see the same year, we have the categories. They really don't change each year, but the size of each wedge, if you will, might. Sales taxes are the biggest easily, 30%. Even more than before. With the, if you think about, well, how does an economic expansion that's primarily industrial affect us? The sales taxes is the big money growth in terms of which revenue source. You happen to have two taxes, a 1-cent tax and a 1.5 in the unincorporated areas. That happens to be where most of the industrial, almost all of it is occurring. So while these construction projects go on, that's where the benefit is in terms of taxes. That's why it's bigger. Your second biggest category, ad valorem taxes, which are property taxes. It's a healthy part. It is an important part. It is increasing as well. It's going to be a little more steady as she goes, where the sales tax is going to be more of a function of how the economy is doing overall. You can kind of see the others. I don't have to go through each one. Bond funds, this is the first year we have that. That's the picture. If you got a loan to build a house and you got the money to build it, that's what this is, except we're going to use it for many facilities here. So that's a revenue this year. I want to point out, like we do every year, gaming revenues, important, very useful source of funds, but it's 5% of the budget. So I think sometimes there's a little confusion in the general public that gaming makes up half our budget. It doesn't. It's a very small piece in the big picture. I'm not going to take every revenue source and do this, but for our main ones, I want to have a chart just for that. Here's a view of the sales taxes. I use just the 1-cent tax in this case because they both trend the same, but we have the 1.5 is very similar. You can kind of figure out what this is telling us. Go back to post-Rita. This chart goes way back. Pretty steady. You even have a bit of a recession in the 2009 to 2011 period, starts eking up, but boom, look at 2013 going forward. Sales taxes have grown. Last year was significant, as you can tell. I don't know that we expect to see that again. So, but based on that, you look at what we anticipate this year and then what we're projecting next year, you're like, well, it's going down. Have we peaked? I don't know if we've peaked with this economy. I can tell you it's still very strong. All you have to do, though, is look at that 2017 number. Imagine that being similar to the others, and look at the overall trend. Even though we're projecting this to go down a little, it's still going up overall. You just have a very, I guess, an anomaly year in a good way in 2017. But the picture's good. Budget to budget, it's actually about a 10% increase over this year is what we're projecting. Let's go to property taxes. That's the other big tax revenue source. Thank you, Kevin. I don't know I lost my track there. Oh, that was Hal. Okay. Kevin White. I'm sorry. I think they did that on purpose. Okay, here's what you need to see on this graph. This is actual property tax valuation. It's not tax revenue. Why am I saying that? Look at your what is that? Y-axis, vertical. 2.5 or $2 billion. We don't get that much revenue. That is the amount that tax assessor updates every year, and that the rates are based on this. So the news is good. When your tax base goes up, we're able to keep tax rates the same, and then when the assessments go every 4 years, you can roll them back. It's a good thing. We are given information that says the valuations will increase about 4.6% for the next year, and that's a healthy increase for property taxes. I think this is the last revenue slide, but I always like to put in gaming. This is all the public agencies combined, guys. This is not just police jury. You look at 2015, and a big old jump between then and 2016. That was when Golden Nugget had been here a while and starting to really add to the market, which it has. It's been very stable since then. Relatively flat last couple of years. Not bad. I'd call that stable. Projecting a slight increase next year. Let me kind of explain something here. This is a little confusing, but I need to explain why this is going up because of the way some of the contracts are with the gaming casinos. They pay us a certain guaranteed amount throughout the year, and then at the end of the year, into the next year, they reconcile what they really owe us. It's always a little lower, or a lot lower than what they end up paying us. And so it goes into the next year. So it's a little confusing. I'm telling you that because it is a legitimate thing to expect some decrease with the I-210 construction. Dane and I and the folks with the city met today, actually had a conference call with the contractor for that project, a very good call. This had to do with the incentive package and so forth. This is straight from them, that's why I'm bringing this up. They have told us that project is scheduled to start January the 7th. And if everything goes real rosy, it's a 365-day project. Point in saying that is, picture all those people coming from Texas to especially the Lake Charles casinos and having that lane closure is going to be for that whole year. We've known that, so it may go down, but because of your policy set way back in the 90s, you don't spend any of your gaming money until it's been the previous year. So anything collected next year, we aren't basing any expenditures on that. It's already money we know we have, and that's hats off to you for that. The overall gaming story is a good one. It's relatively stable. Okay, switching gears now to expenditure side. This is the pie chart for that side, and as usual, Public Works, which encompasses so many things, makes up about 45%. This particular slide or chart shows that includes everything, operations and capital. And you can see what makes up the others, just a good variety of the other parts of our budget. The sanitation, I believe, Tammy, that is actually the solid waste type cost, if you're wondering. Certainly any questions on that you may have. Let's go into, okay, what makes up the expenditure side. I want to break down operations, and then we'll talk about some of the capital projects. As was on the slide earlier, the operational proposed increase is about 3.6% for next year. What makes that up? Well, if you take our current employee base, which upper 600s full-time, about another 80 part-time, and you take what we are projecting, what we need to do to stay competitive, it is still a strong labor market, which means it is tough to get and keep good employees. You all know that. In your businesses or your employers, you know it. We've got to stay on top of that. If you look at the total salary dollars, the increase would be 3.8%. So that doesn't mean everybody would get that exact amount, but that's what it averages to for the whole salary for the current employee base. The second bullet on this slide, which is separate from that, is personnel additions. In the 2019 budget, there is a net increase proposed of 21 positions, full-time equivalent, FTEs. In a growing economy, this is needed. There's actually we're actually deleting some positions, but of the 21, the bulk are made up of the ones on your chart. Drainage maintenance is a biggie. This has been a priority y'all have expressed to us, not just on the capital projects for drainage, not just on watershed planning, but maintenance. We've got 1,200 miles of roads, and I guess you can double that, Alan and Tim, and ditches, not counting laterals, and we've got a lot to maintain. Alan and his budget has put an additional, I think, 6 people. That would be 2 crews of 3 for flush rigs and the things you've got to do for that exact task. And that's going to go a long way to addressing these issues y'all have made clear, because citizens obviously call on these things. We're adding another crew in solid waste for litter pickup. We've got this, and Dane can give more information on how it works, but the experiment we did this year and continue to do has worked extremely well for the type folks we're using for this, and so we're going to add another crew to, frankly, a problem that is getting worse, and we're trying to stay on top of it, and more to come on litter, but that's another position. Workforce development, good news here, this is federal grant money. We're getting more than we used to. This is under Stephanie Simeon and Tarek Polite. Very good grant monies for that. So it's about 7 people in that group, but it's all paid for with grant funds. So a lot of good reasons for the employee additions. The rest are really just maybe one here and there. And at the bottom, healthcare costs are not as skyrocketing as some years, but they're still going up. So the employer portion, not the employee, we're proposing we need another $25 per employee per month increase to cover our healthcare cost. That is not unusual. This is what we did last year, but we've got to keep pace with that. So that's all operations. I'm going to switch to capital. These are the long-term investment dollars. It's a budget out of the $244 million budget. This is about half, a little less than half, $120 million in capital. These are multi-year projects when you add them all up. This is what we project to spend in 2019. You can kind of see where the money is. Roads and bridges, that's your bread and butter. Police jury here does so many different things besides roads and bridges, but like it has for decades, that is your main focus. Drainage, of course, is right in there with it because it follows where those roads are. I want to commend, I'm going to get to this later, but I want to commend Tim and his group. We don't talk about it much, but bridges, which they're not like, I-210 size, they're small, but they aren't your everyday easy things to do. And we've got in this budget coming up, I think, plans to complete 4 current bridges and start another 10. And I think it's about the same as the previous year. They are just running great numbers on bridge replacements, and that's, of course, for the safety of the public. I want to point out stormwater capital here. I guess you'd call that kind of a burnt orange. That's $14 million. We said last year when we proposed the budget for this year We're gonna get big into the drainage project business, and we have. A lot of things you've approved recently that'll be coming up in the next few months. More to come. Big amount for drainage. This is capital projects. This isn't maintenance. This is totally separate. And then you can see some of the others. Parks, of course, are a staple for us. And the major facilities capital, that is the bond projects. I have a slide in a moment that'll show you what those are, but that's a big part of the capital budget. What makes up the capital? I broke it down into infrastructure. This is one slide. These are a few examples. Coach Williams Drive, Biggie, that we broke the ground on that earlier this year. That's in Ward 4. Johnny Bro Road, that's an extension. That's going to be in Ward 7 to go along with a lot of other improvements in the Vinton area. That's going to be a huge help for them. Ham Reed Road, I don't know if Guy's here this evening, but we continue to work toward that major connector. And as I mentioned, the 10 bridge replacements, and I just threw in the total for drainage there. This picture at the bottom middle is a new one. I think we've used these others before, but this is a good example of the ways you can improve drainage under a bridge. You might have an old tank car that was okay for the time, but it needs to be bigger, and so this is an example of how you can improve that by replacing the size. Okay, this is the slide I mentioned that the bond monies will go toward. The way it's not, if you're saying, okay, how does this work? We don't get bond monies that are just for like one project. Matter of fact, we're meeting tomorrow with the folks from Standard & Poor's who are down here to visit and get a better feel, and within the next week or two, they're actually going to provide a bond rating. Very excited about that. We are optimistic. This is what it's for, and it's going to be multi-year. But the one that's actually underway is juvenile justice. Many of you were there for that groundbreaking. But in the design phases, deep in the design phase, is Coroner's Office, Animal Services, Family Juvenile Court, and Burton Coliseum. All of those are new complexes except Burton. Burton it's not, the costs there are for things that simply need to be upgraded or repaired, but it's pretty major dollars. And it's an older facility, so that's the one exception. The image at the bottom is a rendering of the Animal Services complex we're looking forward to. Parks, we always like to mention this. A lot of improvements planned. Riverside Park over there, Westlake area, Mallard Junction. River Bluff, this is the next phase. I think technically it's phase 3. This is the one where we will put a pavilion out there. This is a rendering. I don't know if it's final. But that has been a just super popular park. A few of us were up in Ward 1 meeting with the drainage board up there recently. It was Alberto and I. When it finished, you know, it gets dark early now, so I drove back by there, and I'd been there during the day, but I don't think I had at night, and it's a totally different look, and it's beautiful, and it's big, and then you got the boat launch, and to know there's more coming. It's a very well-regarded park. We hear a lot of good things from the folks up there in Moss Bluff and Gillis who use that. Of course, it's open for everybody. Breen Lake Park boat launch, this project is ongoing and going very well in terms of timing. I don't have a completion date, but I feel pretty confident by the time the warm weather or even just milder weather comes early next spring, that thing's going to be ready. Picture at the bottom is actually of the old way. Decided not to put a picture of the construction because it's not done yet. I want it to be prettier. So that's White Oak Park on the bottom right. It's going to have a new wharf, and Shaylin is very good and persistent, so I think we're putting a spray pad out there too. Seriously, White Oak Park is one of my favorites. It's hidden away, and it's just a beautiful park. Okay, I realize we go through this quickly. We certainly are here to answer any questions, and over the next few weeks, take any questions you have. I'll get to the calendar in a minute, but I'd like to end with a look ahead, and I want to talk about our strategic plan because we haven't done this before, and this is exciting because I have, in my experience in life, unless you plan something and write it down, your chances of doing it are a lot less. And so we're writing it down, and we got a good one. And it focuses on the future many years ahead. to put it in context, so why do you need a plan like this? Well, at the risk of getting repetitive with the economy here, it's important to understand this isn't just, okay, we're doing better in terms of jobs. It is a whole new environment that we live in, which is good. Examples, this is all this year, guys. #1 mid-sized metro region in the nation. Business Facilities Magazine. Small Market of the Year for 8 straight years, Southern Business Development. And just recently, that same report from Lauren Scott, he's the one that came up with this information. Fastest growing MSA in the state, past 4 years, average of 5.4% a year. That is outstanding. We are blessed. We have jobs for people. That's income for our people. Turns in the economy, allows us to provide public services. So what's the trick? Nothing comes that well without sacrifice, which is fine. We're happy to do it, but it's a lot different. I grew up here. I'm familiar with the area. In the old days, you could get anywhere between two parts of Lake Charles you wanted to go to in 15 minutes. Now, you go at lunch, you better leave early. So traffic, huge issue. Flooding, drainage, huge issue. Housing, report out today, you may have seen it in the paper, homelessness is up a great deal. It's not just homelessness, affordable housing. Anything $175,000 or under is extreme demand. Doing a lot better in the single-family housing. I think the demand has been met better there, but of course that pushes out the lower price folks. Quality of life issues, and y'all focused on this a lot in your strategic planning discussions. That comes with becoming a bigger area. You got a lot of people who are moving from other places who you're going to have to set some high expectations. Education, culture, better quality water and roadsides and so forth. And who has to do a lot of that? We're government. Well, you know, we're up to the challenge, but expectations are higher. And so we need to meet those. Well, to do that, this plan, the big, is as much as we've done this year and y'all have done, and we're going to ask you to approve this document in a few weeks, the big test is implementation, and that'll start next year. This is a long-term planning document. It establishes 6 priority focus areas that you chose, kind of broad by design. Over the last few months, departments have used that to come up with a lot more detail that align with those goals or priority areas. And then, of course, the budget should, if you're saying, well, what are your priorities? Of course, a lot of that depends on funding. Your budget ought to reflect those priorities. So a lot of what you see in this 2019 proposal reflects your desire for focusing on these 6 priority areas. We believe probably at your December 20th meeting, possibly the 6th, we'll come back to you and ask you for approval, but you'll be getting a draft of that sooner than that to review it. So that's how we deal with big growth, is you take it on by very effective planning that looks at the details and the big picture stuff. So that's the presentation. Tonight, of course, is the first night we are publicly presenting this to you. Public comment can come starting now through the 20th when we're asking you to do final approval. Right in the middle of that, by law, we are required to have a public hearing. We schedule that for any comments from the public on December 6th. We also ask for a committee recommendation for the budget that night, with final adoption scheduled for the 20th. Of course, if there's a need to meet again as a budget committee, you certainly can do it. Anybody can comment at our office, on the website. It's all going to be posted on there. The full budget will be posted on our website for viewing by the public, as will this meeting and the presentation slides. So that should be no later than tomorrow sometime. So with that, certainly any questions or comments you may have, and we're here to try to address those.
Mr. Landry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian, this issue has come up, I guess, over the last few months and probably over the last few years. I'm concerned about the money that we donate or that we give to other agencies.
Okay.
Not necessarily under our control. It could be maybe some nonprofit that we have partnered with on one issue or another. Or really, I mean, it could be a special service district that we don't necessarily do the finances for. I want, and I think that the police jury deserves a detailed accounting of what's done with that money. Because I think often, you know, we're just going by faith that they've done what they said they were gonna do with those funds. And, you know, I don't know that we go to the extent that it has to be audited, which that would be a big expense, but at least we ought to, you know, that ought to be part of the deal from the beginning. We have to have a detailed accounting of what they've done with the money. And some type of a paper trail to where if something doesn't look right, we can go and if we want to audit them ourselves or whatever the case may be. And look, probably 99.9% of the time, there's no problem at all, but I would just feel a lot better if we had more control over those funds once they leave here.
We certainly will take a look at that. I'll let Tammy make comments as she needs. We, as you know, we have the ability through every one of those, if it's a public agency, like us, has to do an audit every year, and that's available very easily for all of us on the website. We can just, I think it wouldn't hurt to kind of follow your lead. We kind of assess, okay, what all have we given, and let's, you know, going back and checking, did you do this? The good news, for example, let's use your example you brought up, I think you brought up. You might do some of these ward gaming grants to special districts. There's a contract for that, and we do have a program in place that says, okay, did they ever do this? And if so, to get reimbursed, they've got to do it. That, in 9 out of 10 of those anyway, sometimes you front the money. But they usually have to say, well, here's what the bid was on this that we asked you to help pay for, and then we reimburse. So I feel like some of that is done well. We will take your guidance and make sure we review all of those. That's easy to do. And Tammy, certainly if you have anything to add, I welcome it. That cover it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Interfund.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up with what Chris said, am I understanding that we really don't have checks and balances right now, or we do have checks and balances on what they're doing with this money? Because I agree with him that it definitely needs to be accounted for.
I would say we do, honestly, and off the top of my head, I guess I'd want to, if there's anything specific you want to know, I'd rather address it so I can answer, but I believe we actually do have very good checks and balances. In the big scheme of things, I don't know that there's a lot. That example is one. Another one, several years ago, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, the state cut back on what it funded through local health units. Dr. Foch at the time came to us. We have a health unit, a public health property tax. It had the funds in there, and so we utilized, the state wouldn't let them fill them, but they'd let them contract. Long story short, we were able to help fund 3 nurses for the health unit. And I think this coming year, they had a request to add a nurse practitioner. Well, Tammy and I both called and we discussed that with the folks that run it out there. And okay, what do you need it for? So I believe we have a really good program in place. If there's something, though, that I'm leaving out that you may have a concern about, I'd be happy to meet and see. But I think we have a good check and balance in place.
Well, I really don't have any concern, but I think what Chris said was spot on, that if we're going to give money to somebody, they need to do what they say they're going to do with it.
Yes,
you know, in other words, not take it, oh, you got this money, we put it here, we don't need it here. So
No, they've got to use it for those things that they said they would. That is a great
point.
point.
Well made, and I just want to follow, but I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
It's always been my understanding is that they don't get reimbursed until they prove to us how they spent it. Now, I guess there's probably some situations where they hadn't done exactly that, but But that's been my understanding, that that's the norm, is that they have to present the fact that they spent it on what we granted it.
You are
for
correct.
Before.
That's correct.
Before they get reimbursed for that.
Yes,
So
sir.
they have to be able to front the money themselves on most cases.
That's
Been always been my
absolutely correct.
Mr. Abshire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 116 million budgeted for capital projects, but only 14 million of that is going toward drainage.
Right.
Is there any way that we can increase that number? I think we have more projects that we could fund.
Yes, and I'll let Alan cover it, but, and before I hand it off to him, I know, it's just coincidental, this comes along right around the time you started as a juror. We didn't have, I think we had 2 years ago, 4 million. This may sound funny, but you put in there what you're able to do in a year. And even then, it's tough, because there's a lot of design work and all, but let me commit to you that this level, and I think it'll be higher, and Alan will tell you, and he might in a minute, he can budget the next 30 years with about 14 million, and it might do half of what we need. So you're right, Brian, the demand is there. It's a matter of how much can you actually do. But we are, I think, on the same page with you that we know the demand is high. I'll be quiet and let Alan maybe address that a little better.
Yeah, I would just reassure you, Brian's exactly right. I think the best way to put it, though, is we're in the early stages of the big studies, the master planning efforts. When those plans come back and the projects we're selecting from, the price tag, if you would, is going to go up significantly. To kick off the first couple of years, and the numbers you're seeing now, number one, we had some projects that got out the door this year, so really what you've actually spent, or, you know, in the last, over a 2-year span, is gonna be a little over $20 million on drainage projects. Compared to, like Brian said, the past years, really, we sort of averaged $1 million due to our road and drainage trust fund. You know, that was our number. So the police jury has stepped up tremendously and is putting a lot of money. So the other thing would be is we started doing projects that haven't been vetted and haven't been modeled. We feel like there's always an opportunity in a drainage project to fix one problem and make another one. That's really the reason why we're just starting we're kind of biding our time, get the studies in. They should begin rolling in this year, and your next year's budget is probably going to see some substantial projects start showing up that it will actually be a challenge to fund. You know, 14 million might start looking pretty easy compared to what some of the numbers we might start seeing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Now, Brian, when we first, Judd and I sat down with you guys to discuss the budget this year, we talked about several things, and one of them was that we want to show the public the fruits of the pains that they've been going through. So we wanted to increase the capital projects as much as we possibly could and stay within a reasonable fashion. The other one was to control the costs while we maintain and improve our maintenance programs as much as we could. So I think we've got a good balance between the controllable costs that we have versus the capital costs that we want to be as aggressive as possible on to give the public some of the fruits of the pains that they're having to go through. So I applaud you on the effort on the budget. The fact that you've produced a set of goals, printed goals where people can measure our productivity and hold us accountable for what we said we were going to do. It's real easy to say, well, we're going to do better next year, but it's not a measurable goal. So I applaud you on that as well, of coming up with a written set of goals that we're going to go by. And I think we're on the right track.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
Good job.
Thank you for your time.
I would move that we accept report as presented.
We have a motion and a second to receive report. Any objection? My screen went green, so I don't know what's. Any other matters for consideration?
Move to adjourn. Second.
For adjournment.